a long time ago. I don't remember if it was in Divine Comedy or if it was in Inferno, but Dante said, "The darkest places, the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of moral crisis do nothing." It was a favorite quote of JFK, for what that's worth. But I think we're reaching a place again where a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines. They might have something to say, but they're not sure exactly how to say it. And that's what we do here at Story Power Academy. We lead leaders to tell better stories better. And you really should be doing that while you have the chance. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned and share it with somebody.
Master the Story Power method to captivate your audience, improve workplace culture, and 10x your fundraising.
Scan the QR code to book your first coaching call or visit storypowercoach.com.
Hey, I'm Loren Norris here with Story Power Academy, and I want you to know we've got a new course dropping just next week. That course is called The Attitude Hack. If you've been a part of the Story Power community, you know that we work on crafting intentional stories. We mine those stories, we craft those stories, we connect those stories to an audience, and we lead a narrative with them. The next level is to take those stories and deploy them in the workplace. And so there's really three phases of that. The first one is we've got to understand the very contagious nature of an attitude. The second is, how does that attitude, those stories that we've been telling, how does that impact your brand and your culture? And then finally, we're going to discuss in this next course, 6 weeks course, we're going to discuss how do you as a leader engineer attitudes, because that's your job as a leader. If you've learned how to mind, craft, and deliver stories, now you're going to learn how to see them work in the workplace. I challenge you to be a part of the Attitude Hack beginning on June 9th.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. Maybe you've heard the phrase, if you see something, write a comic book. If you see something, call your cat. No, that's not what it says. If you see something, go to the beach. No, that's not what it says. It says if you see a problem, speak up. If the building is on fire, don't just take a picture. I mean, sure, there are people who do that. There are people who are trained, who are specifically assigned. Their task is, like a news reporter, if you see a fire, capture everything you can about it. In fact, whether you're being pulled over on the roadside because your license plate light is out, or you are in some major issue with the law, or an accountant, or confrontation at work. Everybody wants to whip out their phone and get a video of it, but how many people have the opportunity to say something that would change the outcome of the incident? I've got just a few books here in front of me. This is Hillary Rodham Clinton. It's a novel, actually. It's not her biography. It's called State of Terror. State of Terror. She wrote it together with Louise Penny. This is just the first paragraph in the inside dust jacket. The inside dust jacket. Okay, all it says is, after a tumultuous period in American politics, a new administration has been sworn in, and to everyone's surprise, the President of the United States chooses a political enemy for the vital position of Secretary of State. This is a fiction book. There's no love lost between the President and Ellen Adams, the character in the book, his new Secretary of State, but it is a canny move on the part of the President. With this appointment, he has control over one of his harshest critics. I want you to think about what that means for a second, because what we're really talking about is this ability to manage what I call the narrative. Well, the narrative it's not just what you say, it's what the public hears. It's that relationship between the truth, the facts, and the story. Now, in an ideal scenario, integrity would tell us that the truth, the facts, and the story are the same. Reality is, for a lot of people, they have no relationship. There are a whole lot of people who can tell a story it's fascinating, it's entertaining, it's mind capturing, but it has no relationship to the facts. It has no relationship, for an example, to history. Now, one of the reasons that I collect old books like this beauty by Margaret Thatcher, this is actually written by Margaret Thatcher about Margaret Thatcher, kind of an autobiography in a narrative style. Let's see, what was the published date of this book? This book is called The Path to Power. Originally published in 1995. Margaret Thatcher's dust jacket, first paragraph in the dust jacket. In the Downing Street years, Margaret Thatcher gave her own account of her prime ministership from 1979 to 1990. This book justly became a bestseller all over the world. Now, in The Path to Power, she writes for the first time about her personal life, about the formation of her character and her values, and about the training and experiences which led to the 1979 election victory. If anything, it is an even more gripping book than its predecessor. Now, it seems to me that books like this, people who are genuine world changers, they are a certain type of people, not just people with opportunity, not just people with money, although there seems to be a correlation between people with money and people with the path to power. But there's also something else, and that is a drive, a commitment to something greater, a commitment to look at what is equally with what was, and to be able, as AI does, as any child over the age of 3 and most smart dogs, the ability to read a pattern. We have 2 dogs. We have one that's an Irish Doodle. Now, if you look up the dog intelligence scale, near the top, within the top 5 or so, is the Poodle. Extremely intelligent dogs. Near the bottom, ranked at like number 47, is the Irish Setter, which is funny because they're hunting dogs. They're trained. They're used for a lot of different things, but they're not nearly as intelligent as a poodle. So we have the bookends of dog smarts in one dog. The other dog we have is a red husky. Now, I don't know how you do that. Every husky I've ever seen is black and white, but this one is red, and he is as husky as they get. He looks like a German Shepherd or a golden retriever, but with all the husky features. And I know he's mostly husky because of his personality and the way he talks instead of barks. Everything is roar, 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 roar. There's no barking. Very, very little barking. If you're really upsetting, he'll bark, but most of the time he whines and cries like our huskies have. Between the two of those questionably intelligent dogs, when I walk out of the bedroom in the morning and I'm fully dressed, not in my shorts, not in my pajamas, but if I've got on slacks and a nice shirt, when I walk out of the bedroom, both of those dogs look at me, wag their tails, and run to their crates. And if I walk past their crates and don't put them in, they peek their little heads out and they look at me like, what? What's going on? And I may wander around the kitchen and do a few things before I'm ready to go out the door. But the one thing we always do is we open a little bowl of jar of Milk-Bone dog treats. And the minute they hear the lid on that jar turn, no matter where they are in the house, they run to their crates. Because even those questionably intelligent dogs, the same one who jumped over the fence and couldn't figure out how to get back this very morning. I was covered in those silly little grass burrs myself before I got to the studio because he jumped over the fence and couldn't figure out how to get back over the fence. It jumps one way, it doesn't jump back. How does that work? I don't know. But those Milk-Bone dog treats, that's a pattern that they've recognized. They see it coming. They know what it means. The first pattern they recognize is me coming out of the bedroom. If I'm dressed like work, they go to their crates. If I come out of the bedroom and I go straight to the kitchen and I get those, they're guaranteed to be in there. And sometimes they'll bark at me if I take too long to get them to them. They recognize patterns of what was against what is today to predict the future. Intelligent humans do the same thing. AI does the same thing, only it does it much faster. Here's what I propose to you. When I talk about story power, one of the first things we look for is the aha moment. What is the aha moment? Aha, I learned something new. Aha, there's a better way to do this. You mean for 40 years I've been doing it wrong. You should have recognized the pattern sooner. You should have applied some wisdom, some knowledge, some experience. Read a book, for heaven's sake. Put down your doom scrolling and pick up a page turner. And you might find that history repeats itself. Sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. But it always repeats itself. These patterns that we see. I'm not even going to read this book out loud because I don't want audio flags, but if you're not watching the video, turn it on real fast just for a moment right now. Too late. All right. This is a pattern book. This is a pattern book. Bonhoeffer, pastor, martyr, prophet, spy. Did you see the movie? Pretty well done. The book is about 700 pages. Eric Metaxas did a lot of research on this book before he put it together. It's quite the compilation. It'll really shake the way you think about what happened in the last major war that engaged the entire world. But see, there were some early warning signs about that. There are also some cycles. There's some things that parallels, if you will. Did you ever think that around the time of the Barbary pirates, what was going on in northern Africa and Southeast Asia and that part of the world, did you know that there was a similar thing going on in Spain? And while that was happening, there was a little expedition that left. Most people don't know, you got to look at the history really close, that around 1492, there were some things going on at the global politics level, at the religious politics intersection. 1492, that time ring a bell? That was the time that a dude took off from Spain looking for what most people say, another route to India, another route to get the goods, the capitalism, the money movement from one place to another. Others say, no, he was actually, because Spain was being overrun at that time, around 1492. Look it up. It's not the only narrative. There's more than one thing going on at the same time. The microscope that we look at the world through sometimes is a funnel backwards. It's called myopic worldview. But if you look at the parallels in that season of time, what was going on in the rest of the world, and there's a little phrase called religious freedom that gets pushed aside often. But it was one of the great motivators of the expedition of Christopher Columbus. Do a little more research. Tell me where I'm wrong. But there was something going on in Spain that caused the people that were there to go, hold up, this is not what we expected. And it wasn't just happening in Spain at that time. In 1492, it was happening all over the world. But see, one of the challenges was this limited access to knowledge. There had been a clampdown on good history books, a clampdown on strong worldviews. There had been a clampdown where only certain people had access to that kind of knowledge. And the result of that was too many people simply were ignorant. They were like my dog who could jump over the fence one way and can't jump back over the same fence the other way. I don't know how that happens, but it does. There are people today who have seen the patterns of the last 25, 55, 75 years, and they haven't figured out why we keep repeating them. There are certain world government structures that have been tested and tried for over 200 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, and every time the process has been tried, it failed. But you know what failed even more than that? What failed even more than that was the people who sat idly by and said nothing and did nothing, and they watched the same calamity begin the process of rerouting. rebooting and rerouting. It's starting over again. About every 75 to 100 years, we start this same process over again. And what happens is we don't have people who read old books, who consider these thought processes, these ideologies, and as a result, they send their kids off to school, and their kids come back with this new understanding. Well, it's not a new understanding. It's the same stuff that's been taught for 4,000 or 5,000 years, 400 or 500 years, 4 or 5 decades, 4 or 5 years, just a little remeshed, a little repurposed knowledge. And what happens when a leader, leaders are readers, by the way, if you didn't know that, if you're a reader, you have a significant ability to lead that a lot of people who don't read books, they don't have it. They might think they do. They might have a degree after their name. They might have been to a form of, I don't know, paid education. But if they're not reading everything they can get their hands on, their capacity to lead is still limited. Why? Because they only know what they were told to know. I know toes. My boots are not steel-toed, but I polish them on a regular basis because they get scuffed when people step on my toes, and sometimes I step on other people's toes. There are a whole lot of people who are firmly indoctrinated by an advanced education. Firmly indoctrinated by an advanced education. That does not mean they have advanced wisdom, knowledge, or education. It just means that somebody has told them exactly what and how to think. Grab some books, read some books. Here's a book for you, published in 2003. I know that doesn't seem old, but I also know there are people that watch this program who were born after this book was printed, who would look at a book like this and go, well, did Reddit verify that? Did the X community actually validate what was in there? Did the community standards approve what was written? No, this was written when people actually, like Eric Metaxas, did their homework. How many pages is this book? Let's just see here. 608. So last time you bought a 608-page book. In my world, this is a resource. This is not a daily reader. I'm not likely to go through the whole thing, but I do look at some great quotes and ideologies, and I love having that book as a resource to compare what was in the movie because that was fascinating. But see, this little book was written in 2003, older than some of you in the audience. Chapter 1, The Language of Colonial Establishment, from the beginning through the 1700s. Chapter 2, Ethnic Diversity and Evangelical Differentiation from 1700 to 1760. See, one of the challenges that a lot of people have with the British colonial idea is that they call them British colonialists because they would go into a place where they felt like we can conquer this army because they're inferior to our army. They're inferior to our fighting force. And unfortunately, that view of superiority versus inferiority translated through a whole lot of other demographic basics. Inferior education, inferior culture. They don't even use a fork properly. Meet a high-class British person today, and the way they use a fork versus the way we use a fork in America, completely different. And they will mock you. I know. I've been to England. It's been about 30 years since I was on the ground there, but my son's there now, and the culture's different. But back in the 1700s, the British culture, the British Empire, thoroughly believed they were superior to everyone. There was no culture on earth, no education system on earth, no religious system on earth that could match their ideologies. And when you read old books like this, you begin to understand that what we argue over in the U.S., this notion of the separation of church and state, there's a lot more nuance to it than the black and white cut of, well, the church should have no influence on the state. The reason the phrase came up is because in the 1700s, there was no separation of church and state. The church and the state were the same thing. For many, many centuries, the king decided what religion everyone would be. It wasn't a choice. You either were, and you read the specific religious text that they mandated, or you could lose your head for it. True story. Look it up. Look up the Geneva Bible, the Ethiopian Bible, the Tyndale Bible. There's only a couple of those left on earth right now, original Tyndale Bibles. Just a couple. The rest of them were gathered up and burned. Why? Well, because it's hard to suppress a people who have knowledge, who have wisdom, who have understanding, who continue to seek those things. It's even harder to suppress a people who know how to disseminate that information through the stories of life they've lived through. True story. In fact, one of the challenges we face today is there are so many people who are silent, not because they don't have anything of value to say, but they're silent because someone has convinced them there's only one way to say it. There's only one right way to get that information out there. And you've got to be qualified and not cancelable. You've got to be so good, so pristine, so polished, so perfect on the platform, in front of the camera, in the writing of your book, that no one would dare question what you had to say, that your authority rests in, well, being a best-selling author. Ironically, that's like giving somebody the answers to the test before the test is administered. There are a whole lot of people who are happy to go through the process of having a best-selling book that nobody else has read. They know what the triggers are to get it to be called a best-selling book and to slap that label on the outside cover. It doesn't mean they've written a book that everyone wants to read. It doesn't mean they've written a book that sold tens of thousands of copies. It means they wrote a book and followed a process to get the label, because they believe that label is what gives them authority. Look, I train people in the story power method. When we look for those aha moments, here's what we're looking for. The ability to say, I lived through this. The pain and the joy. I've learned my lessons. I've made mistakes. I've paid the price. I didn't just read it in a book and quote it back to you. I read it in the book. I quoted it so many times. I memorized it. I began to live it and realized that's exactly what I want for my life to be. This is a pattern I can follow to be better. Or I read it and I went, yeah, I don't want to live like that. I've got some books like the Sword and the Switchblade, The Cross and the Switchblade, Run Baby Run, Mike Lindell's book about coming out of being a crack addict to becoming a CEO. Some of those books will really mess with your head when you realize the tragic story that led someone to a turnaround. We're in a place right now in our nation where those stories are getting suppressed. In fact, they're literally getting the spine cut off the story, the pages scanned in so that someone can edit it to something that it wasn't intended to be, a rewrite of the story, a altering of the narrative. And you as leaders, readers are leaders, you who are readers and leaders, you have a supreme responsibility to not be neutral, to not be in the hottest fires in hell, to not stand by and watch the world collapse under the weight of a narrative that's driven by falsehood. Now, sometimes we only learn it's a lie after we live through it. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. 3 years to destroy millions of lives and careers and opportunities, to shift the wealth from the middle class to the wealthier. Somewhere in there was a deception. Intentional or otherwise, there were people who benefited and profited from the deception. And there were people whose lives were ruined or ended. People who spent years in jail because they told the truth. And people who today are being vindicated because the truth they told then cost them pretty much everything. But now it's saving lives because it's coming to light. That's a harsh reality. There were a group of people who had organizations scattered all over Korea when the pandemic started, they were told, you can't get together anymore. One particular had an arena space of about 3,500. They would meet on a regular basis, and they were told, you can't do this. In fact, not 5,000 in that space. You can only have 5 people. Because, you got to have your distance. And more than 5 people singing at the same time, that could be deadly. Now, if they're doing it at a bar or a strip club, carry on. I guess the alcohol, changes that. But if you're going to get together in a church and you're going to worship, nope, not going to happen. And so they arrested the guy who kept getting together even when they said don't. He said, fine, we won't meet in the building. We'll meet outside. We'll meet on the beach. We'll go to the park. We'll do whatever. They're like, no, it's the getting together and singing. That's the problem. So I don't care where you do it. You can't. And they threw him in jail. And then several other people went, I think what he's saying makes a whole lot of sense. And him being in jail is not right. And so they stood up. And you know what happened? When they stood up, when they spoke up, when they saw something, and they voiced their opinion, eventually the state backed down and said, okay, you're right. It doesn't make sense that that group of people can get together, 100 of them crammed in a space the size of a closet, but these people can't get together in a space made for 5,000. So we're going to recant. We were wrong. We're sorry. But it was only that their excuse was proved to be invalid. Their intent never disappeared. In fact, those same policymakers are back again 5 years later. Same intention, same agenda, new excuse. Pastor just got out of jail again for the same thing. Getting together, having an opinion, speaking his voice, saying what he thought to be true, what he believed to be true, what he researched to be true, the patterns that he looked at, the future that's coming, and he said, we shouldn't do it this way. We should do it like this. This is a proven track record. This has worked. But he's in the way of progress. He's in the way of another world ideology. See, at Story Power Academy, what we do is help leaders tell better stories better. And sometimes that story is your greatest weapon. That story, that narrative, that ability, that confidence, that clarity to select the right story for the audience in front of you, to tell them what's going on. That's the most powerful tool you have. If you see something, tell them a story. But see, there's a few phases to that before it has the global impact. The first phase is the story power method. You've got to understand how to identify these stories that are learning lessons, that are teachable lessons, that slide right through without sounding like an academic dry erase board. And then you've got to understand how those stories create brand and culture. Culture, society, culture, religious culture, political culture, your home culture, your business culture. These are all driven by stories. Attitude Hack teaches you how to take those stories and move them into your place of business, your local community, your school board, your city council, your own home. Those stories have value. Maybe you've seen the short video clip of the guy who stands up at the city council and says, I came from a communist country. I watched the takeover process. I saw how subtle it seemed to be until it was so repressive you couldn't get out of it. And I'm telling you, I'm seeing the same signs now. All of the early warning signs that we didn't recognize then, I recognize them now. I know when the milk-bone dog biscuits are coming out. I know what I'm supposed to do next because I've been doing it so many times. These signs are patterns. And there are stories that identify those patterns and say, hey, he's dressed. Hey, he went to get a milk-bone biscuit. We know what's coming next. Act accordingly. And then there are days that doggy number one says, I haven't been outside yet. I'm not going to my box. I'm going to the door. I'll meet you at the door, tail wagging, head jumping, feet up in the air. Let me out before you lock me up. Yeah. What if your teenager said that? Politics of hate, crimes of passion. Dr. Randy Weiss Book is designed to change the way people view passion and legacy. Left a couple of words out of that byline. You should get the book and you'll understand why. True story. Last one, I just picked this one up this weekend. This is one of my newest ones. I really look forward to reading it. It's the Europe on the Path to Self-Destruction in the time frame of 1815 to 1945. And maybe those dates don't mean anything to you, but they should. World War I and World War II in that window of time. If you see something, tell them a story. Listen, I'm inviting you to be a part of a cohort. It's all 3 of the 6 weeks classes stacked together. Story Power, Attitude Hack, and Lead the Narrative. And by the time we get to Lead the Narrative and talk about what is important to us to identify in history and prepare for the future, you'll be so equipped with being able to identify and tell a story, you'll be ready for that march. By the time you get through Attitude Hack and you realize how your stories change brand and culture from your living room to your ladies' club to your local school board. Those stories matter, but you'll be well equipped to utilize them. And then when we get to Lead the Narrative, you're going to learn what it means to adopt or reject, to craft or promote a narrative that has potential global and generational impact. Now, if you want to join us on this journey, it's 18 weeks. This cohort has 3 parts. It starts next Tuesday night. August 11th is our first 2-hour live cohort class where we're going to work through. Right now, there's about 18 or 19 people already registered. We'll see how many of them are committed enough to show up and participate all the way through. But if you want to learn to be a better communicator, if you want to learn how to lead the world around you, it's a great place to start. I challenge you, click that link and join us. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, or Tell It Like It Is TV and Story Power Academy. Have a blessed day.
Think storytelling's just for bedtime? Nah, it's the secret sauce for business magic. Stuck in a rut with bland pitches and yawning clients? Enter Boost Your Business with Story Power. 6 weeks of epic storytelling training. It's like leveling up in a video game but for your career. Master the art of narrative and watch connections blossom like a viral TikTok. Simple, impactful, and game-changing. Ready to transform your biz vibes? Dive in now and make storytelling your superpower.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your